Hello, today is May 5th and it's an A day. So back to normal videos. Today we're going to talk about plot and specifically the 5 elements that make up plot. So let's just jump right into it and start off with the very first piece of plot, and that's exposition. Now, exposition is that beginning piece where we learn all of the background information in plot. So this is where we find out our characters and typically our setting. Now, the big thing here is whenever we're talking about setting, we need to remember that setting includes 2 things. It includes a place, but it also includes a time. And when I say time, I'm not just talking about like specific time, like check on your watch. I'm talking about a time period because that can change a story immensely. For example, think about a story that takes place in the South, right? In the United States of America. If that story takes place in the early 1800s, it's going to have a lot of important things to take into consideration as opposed to it taking place in the 2000s, right? So that's very important to think about. Setting, always got to consider the time period. Now, when you are looking at exposition of a story, a lot of times an author doesn't just come right out and tell you, hey, the story takes place now. What you have to do is read through and start looking for little clues, things that occur in the story that kind of date the story, tell you when it's taking place. So you start looking for references to things that characters are using, right? So dress, technology, and so forth, that can start to date a story. So for example, if you're reading a story and somebody's talking about watching TV and they mention something like Netflix or YouTube, you start to get an idea that the story has to have taken place at least, from 2000 and onward, right? So you start to get things to date it. Whereas if they're talking about popping in a VHS tape, then you're talking something a little older. And half of you watching this probably don't even know what a VHS tape is, so I don't even know why I use that reference. So that's important, right? Look for little clues like that that'll help date it. Whenever they make references to the current, government, maybe talking about a president or something, that'll also help you look at what time period a story is taking place. From exposition, if we think of our little plot diagram, we start going upward, rising action. Those are all the little bits and pieces of action that build up towards the climax. This is typically in the form of conflicts that happen in the story, things that propel the narrative upward, right? Typically, they escalate more and more, building up to the climax. So rising action can take place in many different formats, right? There's different things that can happen, and it's kind of difficult to provide an overarching example of it. But essentially, any of those conflicts that build up to the main piece in the story, right? And that's our climax, the highest point of the story. Climax, it's the highest point of tension. Typically with the climax of a story, our protagonist, our main character is going to be changed by it. Not always, but typically. And it's our central conflict of the story, okay? Now, a lot of times with books and stories, the climax happens much closer towards the end of the book, right? And anything that happens after the climax, right, all of those other little conflicts, we tend to refer to as falling action, right? They take place after the climax, so we refer to that as falling action. And then the very last piece, the 5th element of plot, resolution, right? That's where we start tying up loose ends. We get some closure. There's also the concept of denouement that you'll hear about, but that would be for a different video. When you're reading a short story, typically what happens is the exposition, the first piece of plot, and the resolution, the last piece of plot, those are often highly truncated or removed altogether, right? So they're very shortened or just gone, right? A lot of times with a short story, because they are necessarily short, authors will cut those pieces out. So you won't get a whole lot of exposition, and sometimes you don't get any resolution whatsoever, right? You hit to a climax and maybe a little falling action, and that's it. So you have a lot of short stories that end with cliffhangers or very suspenseful endings, and that's part of the draw of short stories. That's why some people love short stories, not just because they're short. So those are your 5 elements. So to review, exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution. Right? And that's it for the basics of plot. Until next time, I hope everyone's well. If you have a question, leave a comment below or just reach out to me through email. And tomorrow we'll talk about some more things related to your plot, specifically conflict, and we'll keep moving on. Remember, we're all in this together. We'll get through it together. And somehow, Nacho has made his way into this room, even though I shut the door. So say hi, Nacho. Now say bye. I'm surprised Loco let you get through. Bye.